Hello everybody. I am ashamed to admit it, but the Nissan Figaro is one of those cars that, because I'm a petrol head, I have always looked down upon. I have always considered it to be a car that people buy as a fashion accessory, like one of those really tiny dogs or a very expensive handbag. I always thought it was the kind of car you bought almost expressly to let the whole world know you didn't really care about cars. It turns out, though, that I was very wrong. You see, history is filled with many examples of cars that manufacturers were absolutely certain would do very well, yet failed to meet expectations. The Edsel, the Jaguar X-Type, etc. However, there are also a number of vehicles where the manufacturer knew that what they were producing was such a niche there was absolutely no point making that many of them, only to find out that demand was through the roof. And this is one of those cars. So to explain a little bit more about what it actually is, I'm going to hand you over to the infinitely more knowledgeable VoiceOver JM.
The Nissan Figaro was built in Japan for only one model year, 1991. All of them are fixed profile convertibles, so like a Citroën 2CV, the sides remain in place but the roof can slide down. They're all mechanically related to the contemporary K10 Nissan Micra. It was designed as a more upmarket small car and featured a leather interior, electric windows and plenty of bespoke touches. The base price was the equivalent of £14,000 and you could add quite a few options too, like aircon for nearly £1,000 or a Clarion CD player with speakers for £1,100. You could also specify quite a bit of chrome too. Originally, Nissan planned a production run of just 8,000 cars, available in a choice of 4 colours, one to represent each season: lapis grey for winter, emerald green for spring, pale aqua for summer and topaz mist, this one for autumn. Of the 4 colours, topaz mist is the rarest. Demand for the Figaro was enormous, so high that Nissan had to start a lottery for people to be able to buy one. Around 100,000 entered, with the final production being just over 20,000 cars. And they've become something of a cult classic here in the UK, with more than 10% of the world's population now residing here.
Thank you, VoiceOver JM. Now, to that basic specification, Alicia and Liam have added a few genuine Figaro accessories which are far more expensive than you would really like to think. Those include the little cup holder down here, which only really has one proper sized cup holder and one, well, espresso holder. These little seat covers that look like they are a gift from your granny, and yet somehow in this car work absolutely perfectly. There's also a little tray for the boot where you can store many different oddments, and they have an original cleaning kit for one of these, a couple of colour coordinated camping chairs for taking to shows, and of course the obligatory Atlas. I'm slightly disappointed there are no travel suites in here. You even have down here an as yet unopened collection of special Nissan Figaro themed CDs with music choices presumably designed to evoke a certain time or place. My favourite being Yokohama Bay Bridge Expressway number 1. Despite knowing that under here lurks a K10 Nissan Micra, you never really actually believe it because it does feel somewhat more upmarket. Now, this particular car is still very much a work in progress. It was sold to Alicia as being in very, very good condition, and it turns out not to have been the case. However, the couple are working on it, and I've got to say, I think they're doing a pretty darn good job. So the dash is cracked a little bit, but actually the rest of it's quite nice. This driver's seat they've spent about 80 hours tidying up, and it actually looks now pretty good. Even the indicator and washer wiper stalks in here feel bespoke to the Figaro. Of course, you'll find the indicator on the right hand side, as per most Japanese domestic market vehicles. The gauges are even delightfully retro, and the whole car really just relaxes you. I'm sure some people would be enormously wound up by its relative lack of power, producing only 76 horses from a 1 litre turbocharged engine, and maybe more frustratingly mated to only a 3-speed automatic gearbox. There was never a manual Figaro. The gearbox, I think, is something of a missed trick, because if you put a nice slick little close ratio manual 5-speed in here, I think you'd have a bit of a real sleeper sort of, well, not performance car, but fun car to drive around. For bimbling, it's certainly adequate. It makes a very distinctive thrum too, and that engine choice actually is quite unusual because it means that this is not actually a K car. I had always assumed that the Figaro was a K car. If you're unsure exactly what one of those is, you've probably heard the term already, but in Japan they have many different classifications for cars, and they're very important because that dictates the taxation and various other regulations related to them. As an example, if you live in certain parts of Japan, when you buy a car, you have to prove that you've got somewhere to park it. With K cars, that doesn't always apply. This is the category that birthed weird things like the little Suzuki supercarries, stuff like that. Part of the K car regulation also stipulates engine size. Now this has changed over the years, but the most common and most recent version is the 660cc turbo variant, and that's birthed some fairly cool cars like the Honda S660. If you don't remember that, I drove one. It's the little baby NSX looking thing. However, because this has a 1-litre turbo, it could never have been a K car even if it fit within the dimensions. The engine certainly doesn't have much of an interest in pushing on. You can tell that it was designed for getting around the city, and there I'm sure it would be more than adequate. In fact, let's test the turning circle, shall we? Not unbelievable, but respectable. Pulling out of a junction, the car's actually somewhat sprightly, more so than you might imagine, but once you get to about 40 miles an hour, it makes it very clear that it's kind of reached its limit. Steering actually is really surprisingly feelsome. It's got more weight than you might expect. You could easily imagine it would be just totally dead and devoid of feel, but it's not. I actually find it really enjoyable. Throttle and brake pedal are both as you'd expect them to be. They're nothing really to write home about, and the gearbox is something of a frustration. You can lock it in lower gears, but honestly, I just don't feel the need. Visibility, of course, is absolutely excellent. Storage space, in fact, isn't even as bad as you might think. You're highly unlikely to ever put people in the token rear seats, but they do leave you with an aperture that's pretty much the perfect size for a large suitcase, meaning you probably could go away for a good week or so as a couple with one of these. The actual boot itself is really quite tiny, and having the oddments tray is fairly useful because it means you can get stuff in and out. If you're on a longer journey too, with the roof up, of course, you can also use the space that it would normally occupy when it's down. Alicia even has the original tonneau cover, which is a very, very small piece, of course, of colour-coordinated leather. It actually really does look fantastic. I've got to say, I spent a long time getting really, really angry about these cars, but now I've opened my heart to it, I do rather have something of a soft spot for it. I don't think I'm ever going to own one, and that's probably partly because they're quite expensive. At the lower end of the market, you'd probably be paying a couple of grand, and that's for a car you know is going to need a lot of work, and then for the more pristine examples, you could easily pay about 10,000 quid. So you've really got to be into it. But people are, and as I've gotten older, I've begun to appreciate that just because I'm not into it doesn't mean that other people aren't, and the car has so many different attributes that just because it's not the last word in dynamics and handling and pace and performance, that doesn't mean it doesn't have its own appeal. If we ignore for a moment the fact that the Figaro is actually quite expensive to buy, the running costs don't need to be that bad. Fuel economy is not going to be ruinous, having only the 1 litre of capacity and just about 800 kilos to drag down the road, but the insurance is the thing which surprised me. You see, the young couple are only about 21 or 22, and they managed to get this on a classic insurance policy, which is very, very rare for someone of that age. So this costs them only £300 a year to insure. That's fantastic. Being older too, you also get cheaper tax, although it's not the cheapest. A lot of modern cars will beat it. But this stuff is all very useful. I genuinely have no idea what made these quite so popular in the UK from the off. Perhaps people that know them better and have been involved with them for longer could pop down into the comment section below and tell me a little bit more about why that is. It's fairly clear that 40 to 50 mile an hour really is this car's happy place. You get just a little bit of wind in your hair. Actually, it's not as bad as you might think, and I'm probably quite a bit taller than the drivers that Nissan expected to be in this. One of the few issues with a car like this is when it does come to getting past cyclists, it doesn't really have the sort of get up and go that you might hope. But then you're also not anywhere near as worried about getting past said cyclist as you would be in a proper performance car. It's a very, very relaxing thing. You do have to be careful over some of these more extreme lumps and bumps because the suspension is very soft and it can bottom out reasonably easily, but this road is particularly demanding, I would say. I love the fact that Nissan really went to town with all the switch gear and all that sort of stuff, and I don't know why they've got a seashell motif for the window switches here, but you know what? Best not to question it. Perhaps my favourite feature is what I can only describe as the ferret hammock down here. So there you go. Hopefully, if you're like myself and you'd previously written off the Figaro entirely, you've now learned a little bit more about it to give you just a bit more respect for it. And if you are a Figaro fan out there, I do hope I've done some justice to your car. And if there's anything you think I've missed out and would like to share with the world, please do pop into the comment section down below and tell us all what you think. For now though, thanks for watching. A huge thank you to Alicia and Liam for bringing their car out. Don't forget to like, comment down below and subscribe if you haven't already.